So, from a political standpoint, not great. From the strategic standpoint, there is no doubt that we've done two things. We've attrited Iran's capabilities down to the point where it would make manufacturing a nuclear weapon extremely difficult and putting it on a rocket extremely difficult, at least for the next 10, 20 years. And the second thing we've done, and I know a lot of people want to talk about munitions, and I can talk about munitions, but we've let China know our capabilities, and we will come after you. We will find whatever bunker you're hiding in, and we will drop a bomb on it. We don't care if you're the leader of that country. And so I would assume China has taken a look at what we've done in the Middle East, and they've gone, you know what? The U.S.'s capabilities for ISR are insane. Maybe we ought to rethink how we might take Taiwan. Maybe it's just easier to buy Taiwan than invade Taiwan.
This is the Global Gambit.
How's it going, everyone? So we have a ceasefire. We have a imminent peace deal, or we don't have an imminent peace deal. And the United States has now struck some sites in southern Iran. And there's the whole idea that Project Freedom may be returning. So is this the end of the Iran war? Not really sure, but I know someone who might. Ryan Macbeth. It's been a little bit of a while. How are you, Ryan? It's good to see you.
All right, thank you. You know, I don't know if it's the end or not. I mean, it's an interesting thing to say because we really don't know who's in charge right now, right? Who's in charge of Iran? So you might have civilian leaders who are negotiating with Americans in Pakistan, but if there are factions of the IRGC who are in charge, and this could certainly mean you have IRGC members, some in the south, some in the middle of the country, some in Tehran, and each have their own little fiefdoms, and they might not necessarily listen to the civilian government, right? And oh my God, I was about to call him Muqtada al-Sadr. It was Mujtaba Khomeini. We don't even know if he's alive or dead, right? We have no proof. So this guy could be in a coma, and he could have some dude who just writes messages down and says, oh, this is what he said, right? So it's a tough one. I mean, it seems like the stock market is acting like things might be coming to a close. But with every day that goes by, the United States gets closer and closer to the midterm elections. And we don't want high gas prices during the midterm elections, although it might take a couple of weeks for that to go down, right? The summer is America's driving season. So that's a tough one. I don't know whether it's over or not, but I think kind of the big issue is we really don't know who's in charge. And I'm going to drink my tea while you give me the next question.
We don't know who the leader is, but Mojtaba seems to be functioning, because if he wasn't, then the Iranians kind of would have admitted that by now, wouldn't they? Or you think because they lost Hanameh Sr., they can't do that?
I mean, did you ever see the movie Weekend at Bernie's?
Yes.
I'm showing my age. There was this movie called Weekend at Bernie's, which is about two guys that go to this. I think he was a drug dealer's house, and the guy is dead, and they need to keep him alive for the weekend to make it look like he was alive. So they have an alibi. So they basically drag this dead guy around with him the whole weekend. It was an 80s movie, but it could be like it might have propped him up like Weekend at Bernie's. They tie a little rope to his arm. Yeah, I'm right here. I'm good. But you can picture someone going into a room saying, "Oh no, the Ayatollah, he is very tired. Any shock could hurt him. So I must go in the room." And the guy's just writing down his agenda, and then comes back out and says, "This is what he said." Yeah, we don't know. That's kind of the crazy thing. We don't know. We probably have an idea from signals intercepts, but the rest of the public, we have no idea what's going on. I think one of the reasons I think that you have multiple factions of IRGC in charge is from Iran saying, okay, we're going to reopen the internet. And then within hours, they said, oh, yeah, we're not going to do that. Someone in the IRGC probably said, no, we're not going to do that. I don't think their military is controlled by their civilian government anymore.
Interesting. I mean, we haven't really spoken through the entire war, and I'm surprised that you start off by raising this sort of political element. I would have thought you were more focused on the military angle, the capacity for the Iranians or the Americans to engage in the way that we did in March. But it's interesting you focus on the sort of
answer. Ask me there. I'll talk about equipment all day. You just got to ask the question. You got to ask where we are now, and it's an interesting situation, because you have Iran that's losing $450 to $500 million a day because they can't get their oil out. And I did a whole video about how they can't really get their oil out through the Caspian Sea either. And you have the United States, which has really high gas prices right now, and you don't want that going into the midterm elections in November. I guess people's memories are kind of fuzzy. Sometimes things that are, at least in the U.S., sometimes things that seem politically important in the summer kind of fade by November. So people who have their minds made up, their minds are made up. But if we go into October and November and gas prices are still high, yeah, that could be a big problem for the majority party in the U.S. And you can't divorce the operational and strategic constraints of the mission with the political realities on the ground. I prefer to talk about the equipment and stuff, but right now those two things are tied hand in hand, because we're in a race right now. It's a game of chicken, and we're seeing who blinks first. And it seems like both sides are still accelerating.
Can't we agree that the American government have changed their strategic objectives multiple times through this war? Within 12 hours of the initial airstrikes on February 28th, Trump tweeted regime change.
So
and then they tried to walk it back.
The actual objectives, and I actually have them written down. The actual objectives stated by Marco Rubio were: number one, the destruction of Iran's Air Force; number two, the destruction of their Navy; number three, the destruction of their missile launch capability; and number four, the destruction of their missile and drone factories. So those are the four initial objectives. Now, Israel had those four objectives plus regime change. I don't believe we ever said regime change was an actual objective. It would be nice, right? But I think that the biggest objective that we had was the objectives morphed, were changed as the conditions on the ground changed. I think one of the things we thought was, all right, we're going to launch this attack. The Iranians are going to rise up. There's going to be protests in the street. The government's going to get overthrown. Everything's going to be back to normal. We can open up everything again. Iran can get oil out. The people can get wealthy off this oil. And then that didn't happen. And that was a risk, right? We took a gamble on this, and just kind of like the movie Aliens, it was a bad call, Ripley. It was a bad call. So now what you have is a situation where you have these initial objectives, and then, oh crap, nothing can move through the Strait of Hormuz. We kind of need that to happen. So now the objective becomes, well, how can we get the Strait of Hormuz open? And, well, crap, Iranian oil tankers are still leaving, so let's create a blockade. And I never thought I would see this in my life. Not only did they create a blockade, not a quarantine, a blockade, because a blockade is an act of war. We are at war. We are at war the second the president said blockade. Right now, Congress still has to declare war, but that would be considered an act of war. I never thought I would see that. But then that blockade shuts off Iran's pile of money that it's getting every day. Now they're running out of space to put their oil. So again, that's another ticking clock, right? Because the second you turn off those oil wells, what happens? Well, now you can't. It makes it a lot harder to restart those oil wells, right? It's not like turning off a sink. In some cases, the oil might leak back into the ground, and it takes more effort to extract that oil again. You might have to redig a bunch of holes. So it's not easy. Or option two is you let the oil run, you just dump it into the ocean or dump it into cisterns I would imagine you could line something with clay and just dump the oil on that and just let it sit out in the sun. I can't imagine that would be good for the environment, but the Iranians are probably way past that, right? So yeah, we're kind of in this really weird situation where we don't know what's going on. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. And yeah, the goals do change because the operational goals or the situation changed on the ground. So now you got to change the goals.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that goals have to change, Ryan, but sort of Trump has made it some of his tweets where he sounds like he's mentally unstable and citizen erasure and civilian erasure and some of these incredible statements he's made, but then it was all in the progress of liberating the Iranian people. I think most people agree that this has not been a war that has been the wisest for the United States or for Trump's popularity and stability as POTUS, right? Or you think it's still too early?
It depends on what you define as wise. From a political standpoint, was it wise? Probably not. From the standpoint of whether Iran receives a nuclear weapon, that's a little bit different. One of the things that I talk about, because I can speak Arabic, not as well as I used to, but I read the Quran, and I've studied about Islam. And one interesting thing about the ruling party in Iran, or I should say not the ruling party, but the people in charge, is that they're all 12er Shias. And essentially, the difference between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam is that Sunni Islam believed that when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died, you had a council of caliphs, these learned Muslim scholars, and they chose the next leader. And the Shia believe that, all right, well, the leadership should pass to the son, or technically the son-in-law, Ali. And there were 12 subsequent imams. And then the 12th disappeared. I think it was in the year 868. 868. I'm trying to do this from memory. 868. He disappeared, but he's still alive. And he is waiting for a time of great tribulation to return. And then he will return and he will march his army toward Jerusalem. He will team up with Jesus. They will defeat the Antichrist. And there will be a time of peace on earth. I believe it's either 9 years or 19 years. And then the final judgment will occur. There are some 12ers Shia who believe that the way to make this happen is to build that nuclear weapon and to use it. If you look at someone like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, why did he build a nuclear weapon? Well, he built a nuclear weapon so he wouldn't be invaded, so he would be left alone, so he could just run his criminal empire, right? India, Pakistan, why did they build nuclear weapons? Well, to defend against each other, right? Why does Iran want a nuclear weapon? It's because they think if they use this thing, they get the end of the world. The Mahdi will return, which it sounds irrational, but not if you're a 12er Shia Muslim. It makes perfect sense. If you believe. Now, look, and you can believe in stones as long as you don't throw them at me. But I think that's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. It's that Iran must get this nuclear weapon in order to hasten the return of the Mahdi. Now, that being said, was it a good idea to attrit Iran's capabilities and push that date back at which way they could build a nuclear weapon or the rocket that could deliver it to the United States, heck, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Israel? Is that a good idea? That might be considered a good idea, right? So, from a political standpoint, not great. From the strategic standpoint, there is no doubt that we've done two things. We've attrited Iran's capabilities down to the point where it would make manufacturing a nuclear weapon extremely difficult and putting it on a rocket extremely difficult, at least for the next 10, 20 years. And the second thing we've done, and I know a lot of people want to talk about munitions, and I can talk about munitions, but we've let China know our capabilities, and we will come after you. We will find whatever bunker you're hiding in, and we will drop a bomb on it. And we don't care if you're the leader of that country. And so I would assume China has taken a look at what we've done in the Middle East, and they've gone, you know what? The US's capabilities for ISR are insane. Maybe we ought to rethink how we might take Taiwan. Maybe it's just easier to buy Taiwan than invade Taiwan, right? So, I hate to say the word win or lose because nobody wins a war, right? It's lose and lose less. But depending on how you define the victory conditions, is it a victory that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon? Yeah, I kind of think it is.
So it's a compelling argument, but is the unconfirmed military gains worth the reputational and political cost? Because yes, the Americans have achieved this. It's fair to say you've set them back, but China has made also significant gains. They are being seen as the much more responsible major power. They're not interfering, and most people agree that China doesn't have to put a foot wrong. They don't have to do anything and allow Donald Trump to sort of self-destruct or cause a lot of questionable implications for America's long-term interests, both within the Middle East and Asia. So
there's certainly issues. Oh, it's the bad part about having the slow connection. I think that one of the major issues is that we spent the first part of 2025 telling our allies in Europe that they weren't worth our time anymore. And then when all of a sudden we need 17 destroyers and frigates to help with the Strait of Hormuz, we go, neighbor! And that didn't quite work for them, right? Now, there are also some technical issues. I mean, one of the things this war exposed is that the UK, which once had one of the greatest navies on the planet, couldn't even get the HMS Dragon to Crete within an acceptable amount of time to protect Crete from airstrikes. So, that kind of exposed some things there. In reality, all of Europe could maybe give up 6 ships because the rest are in maintenance or crew training and so on. So it certainly kind of exposed it. Like, maybe we shouldn't have badmouthed NATO, right? And I think that's kind of one of the things that you get from the president, where you have behavior that plays really well to his base, being that boorish dinner guest that makes fun of the host, right? That plays really well to the base. Doesn't play so well in Europe, who almost seems like they're saying, you know what? We're not going to help you out. We're going to let you stew for a little while. I hope you enjoy the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
So was it worth it? That's an excellent question. I mean, that's one of those things where you go, like, we might not know whether it's worth it in 20 years, right? Because if you can't prove a negative, right? If Iran doesn't use a nuclear weapon 10 or 20 years from now, or we're going to go, wow, President Trump is a genius. No, people are still going to go, wait a minute, that's the guy that knocked down half the White House. So there's no win that you can directly point to. There's only probabilities of what might come. And 20 years from now, people aren't even going to remember that. People don't even remember 9/11. I had to educate people about that particular conflict. So, it shocked me when people didn't even know the difference between Shia and Sunni Islam. We were only fighting insurgents for 20 years. Like, maybe you ought to learn something about them.
I hear you, but again, like you're saying about probability, but it's a certainty that Trump's comments about Europe will alienate them, while it's a probability it's a near certainty or an unconfirmed possibility that Iran will get a nuclear warhead. And also, there's a big caveat with this, which is that Iran's a near nuclear capable state. Right, it had the capacity to potentially build the warhead, but it didn't have the capacity to potentially deliver it. Did it have the means to do so? Yeah. Now there's debates around North Korea, but can you say with all certainty, Ryan, that this idea of a near nuclear Iran was likely to become nuclear? I appreciate what you're saying.
It had to. I think they had to. So when you take a look at any kind of deal, look, if you are 12 or Shia and you believe that a nuclear weapon will bring about paradise, right? paradise is great. I would love to live in paradise. That sounds wonderful. Unfortunately, you have to have a nuclear war to get there, right? So if you are one of these 12 or Shia who believe that, why not make deals and have talks and you keep making deals and deals and deals and deals and deals. You perfect how you enrich uranium. And as you're making these deals, you make your missile technology better. So you kind of lull the West into a period of sleep by making these deals. Your missile tech gets better once you have tech that you can put a warhead on that thing and launch that thing toward the United States or toward the UK or some other country that has nuclear weapons and would retaliate. Now you got your thing. So giving like a moratorium on enriching uranium over a certain percentage, that's I will take that. That means I can work on my missile tech, because right now all you got is a bunch of uranium, which if you refine it enough, you can put it on a ship and float it into a harbor and blow it up. Still be pretty bad, but it's not what you really want, which are those city busters that can rain down on cities and cause a retaliation to cause the tribulation. So, yeah, it's the missile. You got a good point about the missile tech. Like that's kind of the real issue here. Because you can create a nuclear bomb, but if you have to deliver it by ox cart, you got a big problem with that one.
Well, it's like the second most powerful army in Ukraine is the tractors, as they say. You know, the farmers.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, Ukraine is off the hook right now. I think they took back like 600 kilometers from Russia. Insane. They're doing a great freaking job.
Well, that was what I want to do with you in our next episode.
Okay, but I won't talk about it.
No. Well, you know me. I like to tease different parts, but just on this on the Iranian deterrence point, because I've been thinking about it and I'm curious for your thoughts. So let me. I'm going to take a moment to explain it, which is essentially, I think that what Trump has done to a large extent has given Iran a huge amount of strategic clarity, in the sense that they've realized that technically the biggest nuclear option they have isn't the necessity to get the bomb, but actually it's the control of the Hormuz Strait. Because of the US's unique position in the global economy with exorbitant privilege and exorbitant duty and the petrodollar, basically the Iranians have realized that that is their single biggest asset, to pressure the Strait of Hormuz. Forget the bomb. If they still want it, okay, we can debate that. But like, they have geographical advantage just based on where the Iranian country is, the Strait of Hormuz. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a bit far-fetched, or is there some truth to that?
Well, they knew it before.
You think?
It wasn't like they suddenly realized, oh, we have a strait here. No, they knew that before. That's why they invested in mine layers.
Did they have as much clarity on that, though? Do you think?
So, I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was not being prepared for what might happen if we attacked and the government didn't fall. And you saw this, I don't know if you remember study World War II all that much, but the Battle of Market Garden.
Yeah.
Where, the Battle of Market Garden, it was basically a march to the bridge at Arnhem, and they're going to drop paratroopers behind the line. And the British and Americans are going to have to capture 7 bridges in order to get to Arnhem. And if a single bridge failed, then those paratroopers would be cut off, right? That was, not the Longest Day. Can't remember the darn name of it. A Bridge Too Far. That was the name of the book, and then later the movie, A Bridge Too Far. And so when you get to the point where you're planning these operations and you say, all right, we don't know how to handle this. We don't have the frigates, because we don't have any more frigates in our inventory. We got rid of them in 2006, Oliver Hazard Perry class. We don't have any more frigates in our inventory. If the Strait of Hormuz if people are too afraid, because it's not really closed, right? It's like they didn't take a sign and flip it to closed. It's people are afraid to go through it. If people are afraid to go through it, and we don't have the frigates to escort these ships through, what are we going to do? And I can tell you this, CENTCOM has a plan for that. CENTCOM, they're smart people. I've been to Tampa before. There's a lot of smart people in the room in Tampa. They certainly had a plan for that. But we don't have the ships to do it. And I think the hope was, well, we're going to do this. Iran's government's going to collapse. And then there's just going to be traffic through the strait. It'll be perfectly normal. Let's hope that happens. Hope isn't a great plan, but sometimes you take a gamble. I don't know if you ever played Risk. Sometimes you roll those dice. And you're like, all right, well, I'm going to take a gamble on this. And I think we took a gamble that Iran's government would fall, and it didn't. And if it had, we'd be having a totally different conversation, and we would have been having it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
But, okay, and I know that, it's pretty, I think it should go without saying that you and I'm more probably critical of this than you are, by the sounds of it. But, as we wrap up for this half, like, what does that tell us about the state of American strategic decision making, or the intersection between the political and the military, in the sense of, we assume that a regime that has been in power for 47 years with this very year in mind, this very event in mind, would collapse in 4 days? What does that tell us about our willingness to, I don't know, look at the state of reality, or the role of Israel in influencing American decision making? Because clearly they got it wrong, or misjudged it quite badly. This isn't I don't know, a small group of militias. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran, the IRGC. These are heavily experienced, kitted out. We saw what they managed in the 80s war and then everything else, right?
They didn't do that well then, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly, the IRGC is better funded than the Artesh, the military. In fact, the Artesh loyalty, we don't really know where they are right now, and you haven't heard anything about the Artesh. So what does it say? I think it says a couple of things. I think you have a president who looked at the protests in Iran, and he said, you know what? Iran is the weakest they have ever been in 47 years due to all these protests. You have Israel saying, we know where Ayatollah Khomeini is. We can hit him tonight. Now, probably didn't go exactly like that, because there was about a 6-week buildup. Remember, President Trump said help is on the way to the Iranian people. Help is on the way. And that's when you started to get that surge of forces into, it took about 6 weeks to get everybody into place, right? And then you have Israel say, hey, most likely Israel, because they're the ones who actually performed the attack, say, hey, we know where the leadership is going to be convening. We can take them out right now. And you roll the dice. You go, you know what? We can take out the leadership. The leadership isn't going to be able to give orders. Then we disassemble their air-to-air systems. We disassemble their aircraft. We take out their navy. We take out their ability to launch rockets. And after that, the regime falls. And it didn't. Yeah, what does that say? It says we took a risk and we were wrong. And people are going to write papers about that at West Point 10 years from now.
They will, but it makes me concerned about the lack of day after tomorrow. The after the 12-day war and Operation Midnight Hammer, the Islamic Republic had clearly decided to, Khamenei had decentralized command and control across the country so that they could respond in light of such an event, even if he and his senior personnel were taken out. And there's been reports of them working with the Omanis, even the Saudis, to figure out a long-term solution, quote unquote, to the Strait of Hormuz, right? And this whole idea of some kind of financial arrangement. What I'm concerned about, and sort of what I'm getting at, is that it doesn't seem to be as much of a day after tomorrow planning for the US. In case, yes, they got rid of the top brass, but the overall system and structure remained and functioned, even if it went underground. That's what I'm getting at. I don't know.
That can be an issue with us. We're really good at blowing things up. We're not so good at the day after. I mean, you take a look at Iraq. It took about 6 weeks before the people started to get mad at us, right? That's always been an issue with how the U.S. operates. And the conditions on the ground are different. I've got 1 minute.
I mean, what do you think should happen then? What would you be suggesting and recommending people in the room to be doing better?
If I were, oh boy, that's a good question. If I were in the room right now, what I would suggest is, you know what? Let's make a deal. If you're serious about if you're serious about using your uranium for peaceful purposes, send it all to Pakistan. Pakistan will lease that uranium from you. Then they take that uranium, blend it down to 3.67%. They send it back to Iran as fuel rods. I am a huge believer in nuclear power. Uranium the size of half my cup of tea could power my energy needs for my entire lifetime. We have a magic rock that can boil with water. I think we should go with the magic rock. I think Iran should have the magic rock reactors, right? And if Iran says, no, we're not going to give up our uranium to Pakistan for them to turn it into fuel rods and blend it down, then you can kill your way out of a problem. You kill the next set of leaders and then the next set of leaders. And you say, do you want to make a deal? Okay, then you kill the next set of leaders. And we can keep doing this indefinitely. That's what I would suggest. Because they've already proven if they don't want to give up their uranium and have it returned to them as fuel rods, we know what you want this uranium for. And that isn't acceptable.
All right. Well, I like that. I like asking you questions which will challenge and you can give a constructive bit of solution problem solving to, Ryan. So thank you very much for joining us, as always. I look forward to having you back and speak soon.
Dude, wash your hands. All right? Wash your hands. I don't want you getting sick. The world needs you.
Oh, it needs you too, man. We'll speak soon, all right? Thanks for watching, everyone. Subscribe, like, be sure to support us both. See you soon. All right, man.